I walked into the office that morning and felt a pair of eyes on me I couldn't place until I realized whose they were. It was Mr. Donovan, my boss, watching me from across the room with an intensity that made my cheeks burn. I quickly looked away, pretending to shuffle the papers on my desk. My name's Isabella, and I'm the newest hire at Creative Marketing Agency. Fresh out of college, I landed this dream job just a few weeks ago, ready to prove myself in a sleek, modern office, buzzing with ambition. I'm in my early 20s, determined and maybe a little naive, but I've always been good at keeping my head down and getting things done. That is, until Mr. Donovan started clouding my focus. He's in his mid-30s, tall, with dark hair. That's just messy enough to look effortless, and sharp green eyes that seem to see right through me. Everyone here respects him. He's the kind of boss who's tough but fair, always in control. On my first day, he welcomed me with a firm handshake and a smile that lingered a little too long. I told myself it was nothing, just a friendly gesture. But now, I'm not so sure. The office itself is all glass walls and open cubicles, the kind of place where you can smell fresh coffee brewing all day and hear the constant clack of keyboards. It's a big city vibe, fast-paced, competitive, alive. Today, I was hunched over my desk, trying to finish a report for Mr. Donovan, when I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced up to see Grace, my coworker, leaning over my cubicle wall. She's been here a year, always quick with a smile and a tip about navigating the office. But there's an edge to her I can't quite figure out. "Isabella, you done with that report yet?" she asked, her tone casual, but her eyes flicking toward Mr. Donovan's office. "He's been asking about it." "Almost," I said, forcing a smile. "Just double-checking it." "Good. He's picky about details," she replied, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Then she smirked. "Don't keep him waiting too long. He might come looking for you himself." Was that a tease? A warning? I couldn't tell. She walked off, but not before glancing at Mr. Donovan again. It hit me then. Does she feel something for him too? Or am I reading too much into this? My stomach twisted. The last thing I need is competition or drama on top of everything else. See, there's something about Mr. Donovan that's been throwing me off since day one. It's not just that he's good-looking, though he is. It's the way he carries himself, confident, almost magnetic. And the way he looks at me sometimes, like he's sizing me up, makes my pulse race. I know it's wrong to even think about him like that. He's my boss, my direct supervisor, and the company handbook couldn't be clearer. Relationships between employees, especially between a boss and a subordinate, are strictly forbidden. One strike, and you're out. I can't afford to lose. This job, not when I've worked so hard to get here. But every time he's near me, I feel this pull, like I'm teetering on the edge of something dangerous and thrilling. The day flew by in a blur of emails and meetings, and before I knew it, the office was emptying out. I stayed late to finish that report. First impressions matter, right? By the time I was done, the place was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of cold coffee lingering in the air. I grabbed the papers and headed to Mr. Donovan's office to drop them off. His door was ajar, and there he was, still at his desk, typing away. He looked up as I stepped in, and that smile of his crept across his face. "Isabella, you're still here?" he said, his voice low and warm. "You don't have to burn the midnight oil on my account." "I just wanted to get this to you," I said, handing him the report. My fingers brushed the edge of his desk, and I swear I felt a jolt, like static, but deeper. He took the papers, skimming them quickly. "Nice work. You're off to a strong start here." His eyes met mine, holding them for a beat too long. "You've got potential, you know that?" "Thanks, Mr. Donovan," I mumbled, heat creeping up my neck. I should have left right then, but my feet wouldn't move. We were alone now, the last 2 people in the building, as far as I could tell. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. He leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie just a fraction, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, something woody and sharp that made my head spin a little. "You're dedicated," he said, almost like he was testing me. "I like that. But don't push yourself too hard, Isabella. Balance is key." He stood up then, closing the distance between us in a few slow steps. He stopped maybe 2 feet away, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. "I'll keep that in mind," I managed, my voice barely steady. "Good," he said, his lips twitching into a half smile. "You're doing great so far. Just don't hesitate to come to me if you need anything, all right? My door's always open." There it was, something in his tone, a flicker in his eyes. Was he just being nice, professional, or was there more behind those words? I couldn't tell, and it was driving me crazy. "Thanks, Mr. Donovan." "Good night," I said, turning to go. But as I reached the doorway, he spoke again, soft and deliberate. "Isabella, I mean it. Anything at all." I froze, glancing back. He was still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching me with that unreadable look. My breath caught. What did he mean by that? My mind raced as I hurried out, the cool night air hitting me like a slap as I left the building. "All the way, home," his words looped in my head. There's a line here I shouldn't cross, I know that, but the way he said it, it's like he's daring me to step closer. And now, alone with my thoughts, I can't shake the feeling that something's about to change. If you're dying to know what happens next, stick around, and maybe hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my next confession. The next morning, I walked into the office with my heart still racing from last night's encounter. Mr. Donovan's words echoed in my mind. Anything at all. What did he mean? Was I overthinking it? Probably. But as I settled into my cubicle, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. Grace was already at her desk, typing away. She glanced up when I sat down, her eyes narrowing, just a bit. "You left late last night, didn't you?" she said, her tone light but probing. "Yeah, I was finishing that report," I replied, trying to sound casual. Mr. Donovan was still here, so I dropped it off with him. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and how did that go?" "Fine," I said, maybe a little too quickly. He seemed pleased with it. Grace smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good. Just be careful, Isabella. Mr. Donovan can be intense, especially with new hires." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, turning back to her screen. "Nothing, just don't get too caught up in trying to impress him. He's got high standards, and sometimes people read too much into his attention." Her words stung, but I forced a nod. Was she warning me off? Or was she jealous? Either way, I didn't have time to dwell on it. My inbox was already overflowing with tasks for the day. Hours passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines. I barely saw Mr. Donovan all morning. He was in and out of his office, always on the phone or rushing to some meeting. But every time he passed by my desk, I felt his presence like a magnet, pulling my attention away from my work. It was maddening. Then, just before lunch, he stopped by my cubicle. "Isabella, can you come to my office for a minute?" My stomach flipped. "Sure," I said, grabbing my notepad and following him down the hall. Inside his office, he closed the door behind us. The click of the latch made my pulse jump. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, trying to look composed. "I wanted to talk to you about your report," he said, leaning against his desk instead of sitting behind it. He was close, too close, and I could smell that cologne again, the one that made my thoughts fuzzy. "Is there something wrong with it?" I asked, my voice a little shaky. "No, not at all," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "In fact, it was excellent. You have a knack for this, Isabella. I'm impressed." Relief washed over me, followed by a warm glow. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan. That means a lot." He smiled, but there was something else in his expression. Something I couldn't quite read. "I think you're ready for more responsibility. There's a big project coming up, and I'd like you to take the lead on it." My eyes widened. "Really? But I'm still new." "You've proven yourself," he interrupted, "and I'll be here to guide you. We'll be working closely together on this." Closely together. The words hung in the air, and I felt a thrill run down my spine. "I'd love to," I said, maybe a little too eagerly. "Great," he said, standing up straight. "We'll start tomorrow. I'll send you the details later today." As I left his office, I felt like I was floating. This was a huge opportunity, exactly what I'd been hoping for. But beneath the excitement, there was a nagging doubt. Was he giving me this project because of my work, or because of something else? The rest of the day was a whirlwind. I threw myself into my tasks, trying to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to Mr. Donovan. By the time the office started emptying out, I was exhausted, but still buzzing with energy. I decided to stay late again, to get a head start on the new project. Around 7 p.m., the office was nearly deserted. I was deep into my research when I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up to see Mr. Donovan standing by my desk, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. "Still here?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "Yeah, just getting a jump on things," I said, smiling up at him. He nodded, then hesitated. "Isabella, do you have a minute? There's something I'd like to discuss." My heart skipped a beat. "Of course." He glanced around the empty office, then leaned in slightly. "Not here. Let's go to my office." I followed him, my nerves tingling. Once inside, he closed the door again and turned to face me. The air felt thick, charged with something unspoken. "I've been thinking," he began, his eyes searching mine. "About you. About how quickly you've adapted here. It's rare to find someone with your potential." I swallowed hard. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "But I need to know something, Isabella. Are you comfortable working so closely with me? Because this project, it's going to require a lot of late nights, a lot of one-on-one time." His words sent a shiver through me. Was he testing me? Or was he hinting at something more? I met his gaze, trying to read him, but his expression was guarded. "I'm comfortable," I said, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I'm here to learn and grow, and I trust you to guide me." A flicker of something, relief, satisfaction, crossed his face. "Good, because I think we can accomplish great things together." He reached out, his hand brushing my arm lightly. It was a brief touch, but it sent a jolt through me. "I'll see you tomorrow then," he said, stepping back. I nodded, unable to speak. As I left his office, my mind was spinning. What was happening here? Was I imagining the tension? Or was there really something between us? Just as I was about to leave the building, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see Grace standing in the hallway, her eyes wide. She must have seen me leaving Mr. Donovan's office. "Isabella," she said, her voice tight. "What were you doing in there?" My mouth went dry. "Just discussing the new project," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Right. Well, be careful, okay? You don't want to get in over your head. Her words echoed in my ears as I walked out into the night. Was she warning me about the project? Or about Mr. Donovan? And, more importantly, was it too late to turn back? I don't know what's going to happen next, but one thing's for sure. Things are about to get a lot more complicated. If you're as hooked as I am, stick around for the next part. It was well past 9 p.m., and the office had settled into an unsettling silence, disturbed only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Isabella and Mr. Donovan were the last ones there, hunched over his desk, their heads close together as they fine-tuned the final details of their project. The soft glow of the desk lamp bathed the room in a warm light, casting long shadows that made the space feel intimate, almost secretive. "I think we've nailed it," Mr. Donovan said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied grin. "This is going to blow them away, Isabella. You should be proud." Isabella felt a rush of pride, tinged with something warmer, something she couldn't quite name. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied, meeting his gaze. He chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Nonsense. You've got a natural talent for this. I'm just here to guide you." Their eyes locked, and for a fleeting moment, the rest of the world faded away. Isabella's breath hitched as she noticed how close they were sitting, how easy it would be to close the small gap between them. The door to the office suddenly burst open, shattering the stillness. Grace stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to suspicion in an instant. "What the hell is this?" Isabella leapt to her feet, her heart pounding. "Grace, what are you doing here?" "I forgot my phone," Grace said, holding it up as proof. Her sharp eyes darted between Isabella and Mr. Donovan, taking in their closeness, the late hour, the closed door. But clearly I walked in on something more interesting. Mr. Donovan stood, his voice steady but firm. "We were just wrapping up some work on the project. It's not what you think." Grace's lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, really? Because it looks like you're getting awfully cozy with the new girl, Donovan." Isabella's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. "That's not fair, Grace. We're just working." "Working?" Grace echoed, her tone thick with sarcasm. "Is that what you call it? Funny. I don't remember any of my late-night work sessions involving whatever this is." Mr. Donovan stepped forward, his jaw tightening. "Grace, you're crossing a line. Isabella has done nothing wrong, and neither have I." Grace let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Please, I've seen the way you look at her. And Isabella, you're not exactly subtle either. Do you think I'm stupid? That the whole office is stupid?" Isabella's hands trembled as she fought to keep her voice steady. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to do my job." "Your job?" Grace's eyes blazed. "Or are you trying to sleep your way to a promotion? Because that's what it looks like from where I'm standing." "That's enough!" Mr. Donovan's voice thundered through the room, startling both women. "Grace, you need to leave, now!" Grace glared at him, her chest rising and falling with barely contained fury. "Fine, but don't think this is over. I'm not going to let you two make a mockery of this company, or of me." With that, she spun on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming shut with a resounding bang. Isabella sank back into her chair, her legs unsteady beneath her. "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" Mr. Donovan ran a hand through his hair, looking more rattled than Isabella had ever seen him. "I'll talk to her. She won't say anything." "But what if she does?" Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. "I can't afford to lose this job, Mr. Donovan." "You won't," he said, stepping closer, his tone resolute. "I promise you, Isabella, I'll handle it. You don't have to worry." He reached out and placed a hand on her arm, his touch warm and meant to reassure. But instead, it sent a jolt through her, a reminder of the blurred lines she'd been tiptoeing around. She looked up at him, their faces mere inches apart, and for a wild, reckless moment, she thought he might lean in. Reality snapped her back. She pulled away abruptly. "I think I should go," she said, grabbing her bag. "Isabella, wait." "No, I need some air," she insisted, already heading for the door. "I'll see you tomorrow." She hurried through the deserted office, her mind a tangled storm of fear and confusion. What if Grace followed through on her threat? What if the entire office found out? Her reputation, her career, could crumble before it even had a chance to take off. Just as she reached the elevator, her phone buzzed in her pocket. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out and saw a text from Grace. "Meet me tomorrow at lunch, or I'll make sure HR knows everything." Isabella's blood ran cold. She stared at the message, her heart hammering in her chest. What was Grace planning? And more importantly, what was Isabella going to do about it? The fluorescent lights of the office cafeteria buzzed faintly as I sat across from Grace, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles were white. The smell of stale coffee and reheated lunches hung in the air, but all I could focus on was the cold, accusing stare Grace was giving me. Her ultimatum echoed in my mind. "Admit what's going on, or I'll make sure HR knows everything." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "Grace, I get why you're upset, but you're wrong. There's nothing inappropriate happening between me and Mr. Donovan. We're just working on the project together, nothing more." Grace's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Working? Is that what you call it? I saw you two last night, Isabella. The way he was looking at you. The way you were standing so close. It's obvious to anyone with eyes." My cheeks burned, but I refused to back down. "Yes, we've been working late. And maybe we've gotten comfortable. But that doesn't mean we've crossed any lines. I'm not going to let you turn this into something it's not." She leaned forward, her voice a low hiss. "You think I'm stupid? I've been here longer than you, Isabella. I know how this place works, and I know Donovan. He's not just mentoring you out of the goodness of his heart." Her words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Even if there is some attraction, that doesn't mean we've acted on it. I'm here to build a career, Grace, not to start a scandal. And honestly, if you go to HR with this, what are you going to say? That you saw us working late? That's not proof of anything." Grace's eyes narrowed, but I could see a flicker of doubt. Maybe not, but rumors have a way of spreading. And once they do, it won't matter what the truth is. Your reputation will be ruined, and so will his. My stomach churned. She was right. Perception was everything in a place like this. But I wasn't going to let her intimidate me. "If you do that, you're not just hurting me, Grace. You're hurting the whole team. The project we're working on is important. If you blow this up, it could derail everything." For a moment, she hesitated, her gaze softening just a fraction. "I don't want to hurt the team, Isabella. But I also don't want to see you getting special treatment because you're cozying up to the boss." "I'm not," I insisted, my voice steady. "I've worked hard for this opportunity just like you have. And if you really think I'm getting preferential treatment, then talk to me about it. Don't go behind my back." Grace studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, I'll give you a chance to prove it. But if I see anything that makes me think you're lying, I won't hesitate to report it." Relief flooded through me, though I knew this was far from over. "Thank you, Grace. I appreciate it." She stood up, grabbing her tray. "Just remember, Isabella, I'm watching you." As she walked away, I let out a shaky breath. I'd bought myself some time, but the tension was still there, coiled tight like a spring. I needed to talk to Mr. Donovan. Now. Later that afternoon, I found him in his office, his brow furrowed as he reviewed some documents. He looked up when I knocked, his expression shifting from concentration to concern. "Isabella, how did it go with Grace?" he asked, gesturing, for me to close the door. I did, then sat down across from him. "She's not going to report us, for now. But she's still suspicious. She thinks there's something going on between us. And she's not wrong to feel that way." Mr. Donovan leaned back in his chair, his eyes searching mine. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "I mean, there is something between us, isn't there? Something more than just work." The air in the room seemed to thicken as the words hung between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then slowly, he nodded. "Yes, there is." Hearing him admit it sent a thrill through me, but it was quickly followed by a wave of guilt and fear. "But we can't act on it," I said, more to myself than to him. "Not here. Not like this." He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping just a foot away from me. His presence was overwhelming, the scent of his cologne wrapping around me like a warm blanket. "Isabella, I've tried to ignore it, but I can't. You're different. You challenge me, you inspire me, and I know it's wrong, but I can't help how I feel." My breath caught in my throat. "Mr. Donovan." "Call me Liam," he interrupted, his voice soft but insistent. "Liam," I whispered, the name feeling intimate on my tongue. "What are we going to do?" He reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. The touch was electric, sending shivers up my arm. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that I don't want to lose you, not as a colleague, and not as whatever this is." I looked up at him, my heart aching. "But if we keep going down this path, we could lose everything. Our jobs, our reputations." "I know," he said, his jaw tightening. "That's why we have to be careful. Maybe we need to step back, at least until the project is over." The thought of distancing myself from him felt like a punch to the gut, but I knew he was right. "Okay," I agreed, though my voice wavered. "We'll keep it professional. No more late nights. No more moments." He nodded, though his eyes were filled with regret. "It's for the best." But as I stood to leave, he caught my hand, pulling me back gently. "Isabella, wait." I turned, my pulse racing. He was so close now, his face inches from mine. For a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me, and God help me, I wanted him to. Instead, he whispered, "I believe in you. You're going to do great things here, with or without me." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away. "Thank you, Liam." With that, I forced myself to walk out of his office, each step heavier than the last. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, presentations, and sleepless nights. True to our word, Liam and I kept our distance. We communicated mostly through email, and when we did have to meet, it was always with other team members present. It was torture, pretending that nothing had changed, but I threw myself into the work, determined to prove that I could succeed on my own merits. Grace, for her part, seemed to have backed off. She still watched me closely, but she hadn't made any more threats. Maybe she'd realized that I was serious about keeping things professional. But despite my best efforts, I couldn't stop thinking about Liam. Every time I saw him, my heart skipped a beat. Every time he smiled at me, even in passing, I felt a pang of longing. And then, one evening, as I was packing up to leave, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Liam. "Can we talk? Meet me in my office." My stomach flipped. I knew I should say no, but I couldn't resist. "Okay," I replied. When I entered his office, he was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He turned when he heard me, his expression unreadable. "Isabella," he said, his voice low. "I know we agreed to keep our distance, but I can't do this anymore." My breath hitched. "What do you mean?" He crossed the room in a few quick strides, stopping just in front of me. "I mean, I can't pretend that I don't care about you, that I don't want to be with you." Before I could respond, he cupped my face in his hands and kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, but when I didn't pull away, it deepened, becoming urgent and desperate. I melted into him, all the pent-up tension of the past weeks pouring out in that single moment. But then, reality crashed down. I broke the kiss, stepping back with a gasp. "Liam, we can't. Not here." His eyes were dark with desire, but he nodded. "I know, but I needed you to know how I feel, and I think we need to find a way to make this work." "How?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The company policy." "Screw the policy," he said fiercely. "We'll figure it out. Maybe I can transfer to another department, or we can disclose it to HR, but I don't want to hide anymore." I stared at him, torn between hope and fear. "Are you sure? This could ruin everything." He took my hands in his grip firm. "Some things are worth the risk, Isabella. You're worth the risk." In that moment, I knew he was right. Whatever happened, we'd face it together. The next day, Liam and I went to HR together. We explained the situation, emphasizing that nothing inappropriate had happened while we were working together, but that we wanted to pursue a relationship openly and honestly. To my surprise, HR was understanding. They appreciated our transparency and agreed to work with us to find a solution. Liam was reassigned to a different team, and we were allowed to continue our relationship as long as it didn't interfere with our work. Grace, when she found out, was shocked, but grudgingly accepting. "I guess you were telling the truth after all," she said, a hint of respect in her voice. As for Liam and me, we took things slow, but every moment felt like a victory. We'd crossed the line, but we'd done it on our own terms with integrity. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. Sometimes the greatest risks lead to the greatest rewards. And in the end, I found not just a partner, but a deeper understanding of myself and what I'm capable of. If you've been following my story, thank you for listening. I hope it inspires you to take your own leaps, even when the path isn't clear. And if you want more confessions like this, don't forget to subscribe. I've got plenty more to share. Now, tell me, what would you have done in my shoes?